Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about food and if you should eat it as health potions or not. I'm going to have some generic gameplay in the background. I might throw in a few pictures from the Wikipedia. The gameplay in the background, it's hard to get all these exact situations I'm going to be talking about. So I'm not going to have exact gameplay examples. If they do come up, I'll show it. However, for the most part, we're going to just talk this out via just like this, because the idea is pretty simple. And it's not like there's a lot of super unique situations, therefore I don't feel like I need to show all the gameplay for that. Honestly, before we go further, please like, subscribe, comment down below, all that, get the good conversation going. So first we're going to break down what is food and what does it do. Obviously, food is what you bring to Darkest Dungeon. It allows you to survive in the dungeon via eating it. Food checks, campfires is pretty much it. You can get it in some curios, not others. Some dungeons have more, which we'll mention. But that's a general idea of food. Now, some people might say you should never eat your food. I think what they mean is never as just a generic health potion. There are a few times I'd argue it'd be dumb not to at least eat a food, or at least eat food 4 times. So it's easier to go over when you should eat, and then we can kind of backtrack to, yeah, when should we never actually fully delve into the fact that eating your food can cause, A, it's not always the best at healing depending on the facilities you have, and B, obviously food checks, and C, if you want to use a campfire or maximize your campfire, the amount of food you will eat at your campfire will be much greater than the food you would eat individually. So first situation, if you get out of a fight and you're at death's door, just generically, I don't like walking into other fights with death's door already being a condition. So one food being eaten there can be very beneficial. Even if you just want to eat just one, give you that 1 HP, that's all you need. It might be a little more depending on the HP of the individual, but it doesn't really matter. 1 to 4 HP is practically all the same. There's very few abilities in the game that do only 1 damage. Maybe a few marking abilities or stress abilities won't actually do more than 2 or 3. But for the most part, between 1 and 4 HP is probably guaranteed death's door on the next hit, so I would just recommend eating 1 food there so we don't go into a death's door. Second time you're going to want to eat 1 food. Let's say you get out of fight, you have 3 DOT, for 3 DOT you're at death's door already, right? And let's say your food heals you for 2. So if you would eat all 4 of your food right away, you would actually be at death's door by the end of it. Granted, you would not have ever gotten a death check via walking, but you would have gone to death's door. And in a horrible case scenario, let's say you get hit by like an Uka Major or Savage, where they do 8 to 10 DOT, you could actually lose practically all that HP in 1 turn, and then you would have still 2 death's door checks. So 30 potential damage was split up across 10 turns, which is the only real reason why we can actually save ourselves, because we can eat 1 food to 2 HP, go to death's door, eat 1 food, death's door, eat 1 food, death's door, eat 1 to get off death's door. Right, so that's a situation where you would want to eat food to avoid being at death's door, and it would also not allow you to take any death's door checks as you walk through the hall. That is one of those situations. Absolutely eat your food if you don't have like a bandage or a way to heal it up, obviously. I mean, if you have a bandage, I would probably just use the bandage so you don't have to eat food, but in one of those super hyper case scenarios where you're out of antidotes, you're out of bandages, you're not in a fight, you can't heal, space it out. Heal up when you have to. For those situations, to me, those are like you should always eat your food scenarios. The other times you should also eat food is if you're already filled up on food and you get it from a fight where a curio you can't use, you're missing some HP, just eat it. You know, like you can't put it anywhere. Discarding it is completely useless, so you might as well get back some 4 to 6 HP depending on the person, so you can eat your food there as well. Other than that, we'll start transitioning to the times where you really got to start calling whether or not it's worth it. So if you're like me, I overbuy food because I prefer to have a little bit of a security blanket of having more HP going into fights, and it's really not that more expensive. The amount of gold I spend on food, I'm willing to do it because if it stops someone from dying, going to death's door, or maybe getting a bunch of extra stress from death's door conditions or something like that, is why I do it. Let's just say if I cheaped out on food one day, someone happened to die because I didn't have enough food. Just a weird scenario where I lost like a resolve 4. The amount of gold, personal time, and all that stuff may be somewhat equivalent to all that extra food. Also, extra food's really nice if you do campfires, and like I said, it actually also allows you to go into more aggressive parties as you don't need to rely on healers. So I buy extra food to be more aggressive and to potentially save more people. Now, if you don't buy a lot of food, you can't be obviously liberal in your eating with it. Therefore, let's say in this party, we got rid of the Vestal and she's like a grave robber or something. I would pretty much have to use food and the Crusader as a main heal. So I would be a little more tempted for when people got to low HP to actually have them eat a little bit amount of food, depending on where I'm at. The Ruins has the least amount of food curios, thus if I know I can't find a bunch of food curios along the way, I'm obviously not going to eat some food, because every little bit of food I have is going to need to be for hunger checks or death store checks after fighting. Now, if you're in the Warrens or the Cove, there's actually a couple of food options, the Warrens being one of the best, because I believe, let me look up, it's the dinner cart and dinner table will give you a lot of food. So you can actually go in with low food, but a high amount of medicinal herbs, and actually create more food where you can have more aggressive parties in there and they can eat up a lot of the food. Now, even though I just said there's a bunch of food curios, I still bring a bunch in because I don't want to rely on the fact that I will walk by a food curio. It's just one of those beneficial things. If you do, you can bring up everyone to full HP and you're good. So when shouldn't you eat food? I don't think you should eat food if you have a strong healer in the party. Like if you have a Vestal, I would almost never eat food, and like I said, unless it's one of those outside combat scenarios. Oop, let me play from the beginning again here. Unless it's one of those outside combat scenarios, Vestals, Occultists, they can pretty much, even maybe like an Arbalist or something like that, and a Flage. For the most part, if you can get some strong heals in right away and you're not at death's door, I wouldn't eat food. It's not needed. Capping off people that don't need to be capped off is pretty useless. I wouldn't eat it then, and I certainly wouldn't use it as your main and only mechanic to heal throughout the game, as it's expensive, and like I said, depending on the dungeon, you may not actually be able to find it around all that often. Therefore, don't eat it if you're pinched on cash, because all the extra food you're going to buy, just bring in a healer if you really want to save some money. Go to the Warrens if you're going to eat your food regularly. However, once again, if you're eating it in an assumption you will find a curio and don't, hunger checks will brutalize you and it's not needed to get a hunger check. And also be careful about how much food you eat because of your campfire. The -10 stress for 8 total food is really good. So if you eat yourself down to 4 and then campfire but you just had 8, it's completely useless. Don't do it. Utilize your campfire to the best ability. I usually try to keep around 8 or 12 for medium dungeons as I progress down in my food. I allow 4 for a hunger check near the end, and I also allow that 8 to reduce 10 stress and give me a small HP bump. Let me know what you think about eating food, if it's ever okay, if there's a gray area where, you know what, screw it, only ever run the Warrens, eat up on those dinner carts and tables, and screw healers. Thank you so much for listening. Like and subscribe below.